Hello, and welcome to the Mother Birth Podcast, where we navigate the terrains of women's health and maternal well-being through the lens of yoga therapy and Ayurveda. I am Leanne Matullo, and I'm a perinatal yoga therapist, a doula, writer, creative entrepreneur, teacher, and mother. I'll be your guide as we excavate the mysteries of conscious conception, pregnancy, birth, postpartum, mothering in all its forms, and matters of the feminine. I'm so glad that you're here. Hello, and welcome to the Mother Birth Podcast. I am so honored that you're here. Today, we're going to be talking about conscious conception. I referenced this a little bit in the fertility story that I shared in the first episode, my fertility journeys. I referenced a little bit about what conscious conception is, and I thought I would dedicate some time here to go into exactly what it is and how it can support you in your fertility journey and also your journey towards having a baby, towards receiving life. So I will preface this conversation with saying that I have a small child at the time of this record. I have two at the time of this recording. I have a 5-year-old and an 8-month-old, and where I think that I will have time to create an outline and show notes, a lot of this is in my head, and I'm just really speaking on the fly, speaking completely from the heart. And if you do have questions about a topic that I go into or a piece of a topic, I really invite you to write me an email, leanne@leannematullo.com. We'll have everything in the notes. That way you can ask questions and we can continue the conversation there. So conscious conception, I often say, depending on who the audience is, that deciding to get pregnant is not the same as ordering a pizza for delivery. It doesn't work that way for many individuals. It's not as if we can just say, okay, like I'm ready to be pregnant, or I think I'm ready to be pregnant. And so expecting that baby to come in to be pregnant right away, or even within 3 months or 6 months or 9 months, because what we haven't done is adjusted anything in our lifestyle to actually allow ourselves to receive life. You'll hear me say that a lot. In Western societies, we really believe in dictating life. That is a value of how can we plan? How can we have a 1-year plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan? And babies, sometimes we demand them to actually fit into those timelines, in those schedules. That's not how it works. That's not how nature works. In Ayurvedic practice, Ayurvedic medicine is a really ancient form of medicine, thousands and thousands and thousands of years old. Maybe one day I'll have one of my teachers on and she can tell you a little bit more about it. But when we're looking at conceiving and sustaining a healthy pregnancy, healthy birth and labor, healthy postpartum, we really want to start much more beyond the just getting pregnant goal. We really want to start to think about, how is the body doing 3 to 6 months out, or 3 to 6 months before conception? Which sounds crazy, right? Because in Western medicine, what happens is that we might go in to see our primary care physician or an OBGYN, or if you have a midwife, and we'll say, okay, I'm thinking about having a baby. I'm thinking about getting pregnant. And oftentimes what they'll do is they'll say, okay, you're at a healthy weight or you're not, or you're on the pill or you're not. Maybe they'll have a conversation about food. I doubt it, depending on your provider, but they're really going to look at the physical and say, all right, like, go ahead, call us if you're having issues, if you're over 35 and you haven't gotten pregnant in 6 months, or if you're under 35 and haven't gotten pregnant in a year. And that's it. There's nothing else to it. And this is where I'm really dedicated to expanding the perinatal definition beyond what Western medicine, what allopathic medicine says is the period right before conception and the period right after birth. As a perinatal yoga therapist, I'm looking at the time of fertility, the time of preconception, so a year, 6 months, 3 months before conceiving, and then years postpartum, because we know that that's actually what creates healthier mothers, healthier parents, healthier babies, and eventually healthier communities and healthier societies. That's why I'm here. That's why I love this work, so I can really see and envision that for the future. So going back to deciding that, okay, I want to have a baby, and having this conversation with your care provider, it's very physical oriented. So it's only looking at the physical body. And Ayurveda is really asking us to expand our definition of health. And I'm going to give us some really practical ways in a moment. The same thing happens when we're having issues. So maybe you're not becoming pregnant, and or maybe you're not getting a cycle and you're being referred out to all these different providers. They're only looking at your physical body. They're only saying, okay, well, your physical body is not doing the thing, your hormones are XYZ. And so we need to intervene in some way, rather than saying, what is the root of this issue? And how do we work on healing the body before we allow it to carry a baby? Because if we're forcing the body to do something that it doesn't necessarily want to do for good reason, perhaps the pregnancy won't be as healthy. Perhaps the labor and birth won't be as empowering. Perhaps the postpartum will be that much more challenging. We're not thinking about that. We're just thinking about we have the goal, we want the goal, we want it to happen now. We're not thinking about how do we enhance the entire experience and how do we really support the life of the mother and the life of the baby or babies if there are multiple. In the yoga therapy tradition, there is something called the Panchamaya Kosha model. And this is what I work with all of the time when working with clients one on one, and more so now in group settings and group mentorship programs. And Pancha means five, Maya means, you could translate it as a veil. Okay. And then a kosha is a sheath or a covering. And so you can think of a kosha like a layer. And there are five in the yoga therapy tradition. And so basically what they are is layers of our human, meaning the layers of what it means to be human, the layers that we need to pay attention to in order to create a whole system vitality, whole system health, okay? And so very loosely translated, the first kosha, Anamaya kosha, would be the physical layer. I'm going to go into each of these in a little bit more depth. Is the physical layer. And then you have the pranamaya kosha, which would be the energetic layer. This is completely missing from much of our culture. Is how are we paying attention and supporting energy, also known as chi in Chinese medicine, prana in yogic tradition. Manamaya kosha would be the emotional mental space. Okay, so what is the health of our emotions? What is our relationship with stress? I'm going to talk about all these things in more depth. And then we have the last two layers, Vijnanamaya kosha. Vijnanamaya is all about intuition and instinct and really connecting with that power center within. And then Anandamaya is the bliss. Like, where's the bliss? Where's the joy? And so, how are we looking at all of these layers in the 6 to 3 months? Okay, notice I said 6 to 3, not 3 to 6. We're really planning 6 months before conception. How are we looking at all of those layers in order to support conception, in order to support the receiving of life? Am I in a state? Is my body in a state? Is my mind in a state where I can actually receive life? Because it's a big deal. And you might say, like, okay, well, there are people who get pregnant and they don't do this. Of course there are. Of course there are. Right. But if you're here, it's likely because A, you want to go about this in a different way. Maybe you've had an experience before that was a little bit more challenging, and this is really intriguing, and probably you have a feeling it'll be really supportive for you. Or maybe you're actually having a really hard time getting pregnant and you're like, what is the deal? I'm doing all of the things I'm quote unquote supposed to be doing. So I'm going to spend a lot of time on what we call the Annamaya Kosha layer, the physical layer. And I'm going to touch on the other four. And what I'll invite you to do is this podcast, there aren't sponsors, there aren't advertising, but there is me. And so if any of these pieces sounds interesting or like you want to go deeper, I really invite you to contact me, and perhaps we can work together on your conscious conception and your fertility journey. I would love to support you in that. Annamaya Kosha, the physical layer of our being. So this is the relationship, our relationship to everything that's physical about ourselves. So one of the first things that I ask is, how are you nourishing yourself? And would your body believe you when you say, I am nourishing my body? Or would it actually have some sort of protest? Would it disagree? Let's talk about food. Okay. I'm kind of like hesitating on certain things here because I know that there will be There will be triggers, and I invite you to actually lean into those because it's actually a place that's probably telling you I could use some healing here. So, first of all, what is my relationship with food? How am I eating? Am I eating enough? Okay. A lot of times we hear about being overweight for pregnancy. Actually, the majority of people that I see aren't eating enough. There's a really scarcity minded relationship with food about it having to be a certain way, clean, terrible word, as if there's like clean and dirty food. Literally, there could be, but you know, am I eating in a way that's for the most part, like I can sit down and enjoy a meal? I'm not scarfing it down at my desk, or eating it really late at night or not all in the morning where it's really sporadic. Does my body really feel nourished? Are the foods that I'm eating good for my body? Not good because somebody told me that they might be good for me, but is my body actually responding to them in a good way? So, from an Ayurvedic perspective, what I recommend is making sure that we have lots of healthy oils, fats, all the things, the olive oils, the ghee, the nuts, the seeds, the nut butters, good grass fed butter that you're getting. I recommend animal protein. I do for most people. I would say that this is definitely needed. And having, the chicken and the red meat and the fish, uh, you know, good dairy. This can be super controversial. Maybe you don't tolerate dairy very well. Some people really don't. Some people don't tolerate pasteurized dairy very well. So you could look into that. Maybe I'll have you read between the lines on this. Really good organic fruits, vegetables are as good as you can, but trying to stay away from empty calories, trying to stay away from counting calories, trying to stay away from this obsession with is food good or bad, okay? Really embracing how can I use this food to nourish my body and my baby eventually, because the food creates the tissues in our body, and the baby that we are developing or we will be developing is actually pulling from that tissue. And so we need to actually invite in good, nourishing food. I know I'm spending a lot of time here in order to create healthy babies. We need that. So thinking about that, what's my relationship with food? Am I eating too much? Am I eating too little? Am I rushed? Is it good quality food? Am I paying attention to it? Do I enjoy cooking? Am I treating myself like a goddess when I'm sitting down to eat? Like these are all really good, important things. The next piece of this physical layer is what is my relationship with exercise? I prefer the word movement. What is my relationship with movement? But the more common vernacular is exercise. What is my relationship with it? Am I exercising too much? Am I not really moving my body at all? After I do my exercise practices, am I tired, more anxious, more stressed out, really sore? Is it actually doing the thing that I think it's going to be doing? We have a real obsession with high impact workouts in our culture. 60% of menstruating women who are exercising, they have issues with their menstruation. Doesn't necessarily mean that they have impaired fertility, but they could. And if they are having issues with menstruation, then likely they are. It's just maybe they don't know because they're not interested in getting pregnant. That's a huge statistic. So, one of the things I see most often in my practice is not that people are not moving their bodies enough. It's more so that they're moving them way too much. And so that creates what's called an energy deficit in the body, meaning that so much energy is moving out and not enough is pouring in. So if we're moving that much, if we're doing all the running, all the cardio, all the CrossFit, all the Orange Theory, you name it, and we're not actually getting enough input in food, in rest, okay, in pleasure, in joy, we're at a deficit. The body's not a safe place to create life. This is a really hard pill to swallow for many people, and I was one of those people. So if this is like a triggering thing for you, like I totally get it. You really need to think about your relationship with movement, especially if you're trying to get pregnant. If you are a long distance runner, if you are a hardcore weightlifter and you are really struggling to get pregnant, I would really re-examine that practice. And I really prefer using the term movement because there are so many ways that we can move our body in a day that are so beneficial. Walking, of course, if you have other children, playing with those children, making a meal from scratch is movement, like chopping vegetables. Try chopping a butternut squash by just with your knife. Like it is hard, it is work. doing your laundry, doing a yoga practice, doing Pilates, going swimming, going to the beach, going for walks on the beach. Like, these are all forms of movement that can be really supportive and nourishing for the body. And the big piece here is the body wants to feel safe. I wrote a whole essay on this. It's on my website. The body wants to feel safe. And working with all of these layers will create this sense of safety in the body so that it doesn't feel like it's constantly running from, like a saber-toothed tiger or something like our ancestors did. It actually feels like, oh, like there isn't a famine, there's not a war, the body can be safe. And if it's safe, then it can receive life. Okay. Other pieces of physicality, would be looking at how often am I actually out in my environment? Am I in the physical world or am I on my screen? It might be examining like my actual environment. Do I love my home or my apartment? Is it a place where I feel really secure and nurtured and beautiful? Like you can look into all those things. There's more, but I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to start to move into the energetic space. So this is a little bit more abstract and a little bit more obscure. The Pranamaya Kosha is the energetic layer. So one of the ways that I can describe this as, getting in touch with our energy is how are we breathing? I also don't know if you can hear my child, my baby in the other room. How is my relationship with my breath? Is my breath constantly in my chest? Is it constantly really short and really shallow? Can I expand my breathing? Do I have a hard time taking full breaths? This will tell you a lot about your energetic state, the prana that's flowing or not flowing. And we really want that life force energy to come into the body because on a more scientific level, it's actually bringing in the parasympathetic nervous system. So bringing you into more of that state of ease. Okay. Again, we need that. We need that because when we're not in a state of ease, and that's happening more often than not, the body basically says we are in stress, we are on overload. And the thing that it turns off, this is very simplistic terms, doesn't need reproduction to survive. So it basically impairs the functioning of that part of the body. All right. So this is why we need to pay attention to ease. Another way that I describe energy is, just generally like, how is my energy on a day-to-day basis? Am I tired? Am I sluggish? Am I kind of like over the top? Am I always like moving and hurried and kind of frenzied? Or am I pretty neutral? And not I want to even say mellow, but just in this state of ease, harmony, peace. Like, am I there? And one of the ways that I describe this is looking at your calendar. So if you were to look at your calendar and it's completely full, all day you have meetings at work. Then you come down or you come home at night and you look at your calendar and you have all these things going on in the evening. And then you look at your weekends and almost every single weekend is booked up and there's no white space. Energetically, you're probably running at a deficit, or you think that you need to do those things. You need to be in all these different places for whatever reason. If there is no space on your calendar for you, there is no space for a baby. Okay? Babies take up a tremendous amount of time. And if there's no space for you, there's no white space for you to have your contemplative practice, your meditation, your time in nature, your time for just spontaneity and play, you know, then where is that space for a baby? It's an exercise that I give a lot is, okay, well, where's the space for you? And like, how would a baby fit into this? Because a lot of us think, all right, we're going to have a baby and then we're just going to go back to our lives of working and our social lives and all of the things just with a baby on our hip. And that's not how it works. And so if you can actually adjust your expectations and adjust the way you're living in these 3 to 6 months before conception, you are going to have a much smoother pregnancy and a much, much, much smoother postpartum. Truth. Very true. And also when, again, going back to this energy, when we have all these activities, it's really the energy is constantly moving outward. There's nothing that's actually being poured in. Not to say that every activity is energy outward. You might have something that's very life-giving, like going to the beach or something might be very life-giving. Now, I want to take a moment to pause and actually say that when we're looking at the physical and energetic and even the emotional, mental, when we get there, oftentimes we can look healthy from the outside by quote unquote society standards, but we are not well on the inside. This is where conscious conception is coming in because consciousness is different than a societal norm. Okay. Just because something is a societal norm does not mean that it's healthy. And so I'll give my example. When I was trying to get pregnant with our first baby and was going through my 2.5 years of my fertility journey, I looked quote unquote healthy to, the observer that wasn't necessarily in the spaces that I circulate in now. I was really thin, like really thin, and I ran a ton and I ate quote unquote well, but I wasn't really eating enough. And I had a really great job, a couple of jobs, I was traveling and on planes and this and that. But I was actually very sick. My mind wasn't well. My body was begging for me to do something different. My hair was falling out. My nails were brittle. I wasn't eating enough food. I wasn't digesting food well. But on paper, everything looked great, but I was actually sick. And that's something that I want you to also think about is on paper, does this look great? Is this what society says? You work out, you exercise, you go really intense because that's what matters, that's what counts. You eat the right foods, you have a really intense job, you're constantly moving, constantly doing, and that looks great to society. But is that actually serving me and my body, my whole body? Would that actually serve a baby? Probably not. Okay. So going into Manamaya Kosha, going into the mental emotional space, here's where we examine our relationship with emotion, our relationship with what's happening in the mind. Is it a healthy place? Is it a happy place? I don't even want to say happy. Is it a serene place? Can it actually experience happiness? What are the patterns, the constant thought patterns that I have? Are they supportive? Are they not? Is there a lot of stress in my life? Do I constantly feel mentally stressed? Okay. What is my job like? What are my obligations? What is my relationship with my partner? We would talk about all of these things again in the 3 to 6 months leading up to conception to see where support is needed. Do I need more support for my mental emotional space? Is there something that I'm grieving that I haven't worked through? Something that I'm anxious about that I haven't necessarily worked through? And not that you need to be completely healed to conceive. That's not what I'm talking about. It's more so that I've created this space for me to consider and to contemplate and to move into a journey for healing. Because what we also find too is that when we have babies, they're very triggering. Babies and young children, they stir up all of those emotions that we've tried to stuff down so deep below the surface. And again, if you can start to bring those things to light, what we call our shadow sides, and work with them, not from a place of fear, but from a place of curiosity, we can do so much beautiful work even before our babies come into our bodies and, of course, arrive earthside. So I would invite you to really examine my emotions, my relationship with stress, my relationship with my partner, with my friends. This is also a piece where I would say, what is my relationship with nature too? Because when we get pregnant and we move through our pregnancy journeys, and then when we move through our labor and births, particularly if there's not too much intervention, and our postpartum journeys, then we realize, wow, we are no different from nature. So it's like, how can we connect with her and really see nature? I'm looking out at my trees right now, see nature in ourselves in this time, again, that 3 to 6 month window as we are preparing to consciously conceive. Deep breath. I'm going to take a sip of my tea before we go into the next. So the last two layers in the Kosha model would be Maya Kosha, which is our relationship with our intuition and instinct, and then Maya, which is our relationship with pleasure, with bliss, with joy. So it is harder, I would say, sometimes to come into these two koshas, not impossible, but I do want to give you a bit of a way that you can work with them. And one of the simplest of questions is, how do I relate to my intuition? Do I listen to that voice, or am I more tuned into the voice of logic? Intuition is going to be incredibly powerful for a fertility journey, for a pregnancy journey, for a labor, birth, for a postpartum. What it's actually teaching us to do is to really trust ourselves, which is incredibly lacking in modern society. We constantly look outside of ourselves. So here we are on this fertility journey, this conscious conception journey. And we're learning, oh, wait a second, there's so many answers that are already within myself, but do I know how to tap into that? Do I know how to allow myself to be led to where life is taking me? Do I know how to move into flow, or do I force my way through life? Okay. That would be something to begin to ask about. And then finally, when we come to Ananda Maya Kosha, the bliss body, what is my relationship to joy? Where's the joy? It's one of the first questions I ask any client that I work with in this capacity, postpartum to chronic pain, all of it. Like, where's the joy? You know? And so often we think of joy as synonymous with happiness. It's not. I'm not asking you, like, where's the happiness? Where is that like puppy like, energy? No, I'm asking like the joy. Like, where's like that state of being? What brings you pleasure? What brings you bliss? What puts you into a state? Again, that word ease is coming up. Really important. There's a direct line, which makes sense anatomically. There's a meridian line in Chinese medicine from the heart to the womb. And so a lot of the work that I do in conscious conception is how do we nourish both of these spaces, knowing that a healthy heart will create health in the womb space. All right. It's not the other way around. Okay. If I have a baby, then I'll be happy. No, 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 no. No. Starts with the heart. With that, we've gone through so much in terms of things that you can think about in terms of inviting a baby or babies in. 5 different layers. The Panchamaya Kosha model is what I use. 5 layers to really assess your whole person well-being and start to examine ways that you can heal all parts of self, the physical, all the way to the most subtle, in a way that will support conception and will support your pregnancy journey. You might hear those dogs or a dog sitting today. If you have questions about any of this, I truly invite you to reach out. I would love to support you. I would love to hear what's resonating, what you still have questions about, what you'd like to expand further on. I am really here for you. On my YouTube channel, I also have a couple of practices that are dedicated to conscious conception. So you can begin to experience that in the physical, energetic, emotional spaces, which will also strengthen your connection to your instinct, to your intuition, that inner wisdom, as well as your connection to joy and to bliss. So thank you for listening. I've really enjoyed sharing this with you, and I'll talk to you soon.